Hi everyone, and welcome to today's presentation on Solid Edge Technical Publications. For the agenda today, we are going to cover the Solid Edge Technical Publications with an overview demonstration. And what we're going to do is just highlight some of the key capabilities that the software has to offer. We're going to do that utilizing kind of a day in the life workflow of creating this type of documentation and utilizing Solid Edge and its design data and referencing that to create some of the technical documentation that we might need. Within the demonstration, we're going to highlight some of the areas of some of the new things that have been added to Solid Edge 2023. Following the demo, we're going to talk about some of the training resources that are available, and then at the end, we'll also have the ability, I believe within the office hours, to ask some questions if you had some questions maybe that weren't answered through the demonstration. The good news is for most of you today who are on the call, as a Solid Edge customer, you have these 3D digital models that you've created as part of your product development process in the form of Solid Edge CAD files. Unfortunately, sometimes converting those 3D CAD files into technical documentation, it can oftentimes be a painstaking process that requires time as well as expertise. So, a lot of times instead of converting files, your designers or engineers, they may create bitmap screen captures of CAD images. So as an example, whether it's those bitmap images of a specific orientation, or maybe you need to maybe create illustrated type images, maybe through an illustration type software, or maybe as another resource, maybe you create photographs of the finished physical prototype. And I guess one of the drawbacks to that is in order to create those images or those photographs, a lot of times you have to manufacture something first, which a lot of times creates additional time and resources. So as the slide here shows, is traditionally what has typically happened from a design and documentation standpoint is the documentation always came after the design because the documentation always had to reflect the final state of the design in order for it to be accurate. And so, the goal is to have the ability to build these publications and other types of documentation in tandem with design. And what that should allow you to do is allow the illustrators or those who are creating this technical documentation, give them more time to detail their work because they can start the process much sooner, even while the design is still going on. And the reason for that is, being able to link these two things together, the documentation with the CAD design data, so that when late stage design changes occur, you don't have to worry about having to miss that stage or miss that design change within the documentation because they are associatively linked together. We're going to go ahead and dive into the Solid Edge Technical Publications technical overview demonstration, and we're going to handle this from several vantage points. We're going to start first by taking various aspects of the Solid Edge design information, whether it's some of the CAD information with display configurations or file properties, and utilizing some of that information within the technical documentation, repurposing it so that we don't have to spend additional time recreating it. We're going to go from there into showing how those who may be creating the technical documentation who aren't CAD savvy, who don't know anything about Solid Edge in particular, ways that they can create some of this technical documentation on the fly, on their own within the tool itself, and maybe to create other types of information that may not be captured yet. From there, we'll go and show how the technical documentation and the Solid Edge design are linked together so that if a design change occurs during the process of creating the technical documentation, it's not a big deal because the technical documentation will automatically be updated and the two will be synced together. And then finally, we'll go through and show how you can publish this to consumable formats, whether it's a 3D PDF or whether it's an HTML website. How can consumers, once this documentation has been created, consume the information in very clear, concise formats? So let's go ahead and start with that first topic, which is leveraging existing design information. So we know that one of the main benefits of a documentation tool like Solid Edge Technical Publications is being able to leverage the visual display and interaction with the CAD data itself. So again, this makes the information much easier to consume versus static images as an example. So because also technical publications is pulling features from the CAD information like display configurations, file properties, and there are others as well. The illustrators don't have to manually recreate that data. They can leverage the information. So we're going to go through this first portion of the demonstration and show how we go from Solid Edge CAD into the technical publications area, and then how we can leverage some of that existing information. All right, so now that we're in Solid Edge, let's go through and talk about some things that you're probably familiar with today. So obviously, the manipulation of models within a CAD tool, you're going to see some similar features within the technical documentation tool as well. So, you're probably using display configurations today. If I want to highlight and look at just the mainframe, or maybe there's some other areas of the sewing and embroidery machine that we're working with today, maybe the motor itself that we want to isolate, we have these display configurations that we can look at and hide and show components and then save those views for downstream purposes. Many of you today are probably using things like exploded views in a draft file. You can utilize those same views within the technical publication software. So we're going to go ahead and turn on the entire machine at this point. And what we want to do is we want to go take this information, and you'll see that there's a single button click that goes into the 3D publishing portion of the technical documentation or the technical publication software. It'll take you right into the software. It gives you access to different templates. What type of documentation are you looking to create? Maybe for this first example, we want to do some work instructions. We can preview the template itself. But also with those display configurations we just looked at, you have the opportunity to specify if you want to bring in all of that information, or if you would just want to select and pick just a couple or a few of those. The benefit is the less configurations you bring across, the faster it brings the information over. What we're going to do is we're just going to bring over all of the display configurations just so you can see where it places those. And you can see even with bringing all of them over, it comes over very, very quickly. So down here at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that this is our storyboard area, which is what we're going to create different illustrations for. And what the Solid Edge Technical Publications tool does is it creates individual illustrations for each of the display configurations. So you see here we have the one for the motor in its exploded state, and then you can see all the others at the bottom of the screen. I may want to start to create some documentation. You can see over here on the left-hand side, this is a new feature for Solid Edge 2023. This Pages tab gives you a preview of all the different pages and what's included on those pages within this particular template. So whether you're looking at the model with an associative parts list, or whether you want to create some detailed instructions with text information, these templates exist and are ready to go right out of the box. What I want to do in this example is I want to create a brand new storyboard, and I'm going to utilize some of the information that we brought over from Solid Edge, but I want to focus first on the motor. And so when I come into the motor area or come over into the display configurations, I can have it switch from showing the entire sewing and embroidery machine to just focusing in on one of the display configurations. So I just select the motor, and now I'm ready to create some unique illustrations down in my storyboard. So I may want to show this maybe in specific context. Do I want to show the edges? Do I want to change my background color? If I highlight a part, what color will it be highlighted in? You have all these different tools that you can play with. So within my first illustration, I'm showing the motor within its assembled state. I also want my interactive parts list to reflect what is being displayed. So all I have to do is change it to look at just the motor configuration. And then you'll see how it just shows the specific parts within the motor. The other nice feature too is as I highlight an item within my parts list, it highlights graphically on screen, and vice versa. If I were to pick something graphically, it would highlight in the parts list. I may want to duplicate this illustration to create a secondary one showing the motor in its exploded state. And as you might guess, I can point this particular illustration to the exploded display configuration that came over from Solid Edge. So again, very easy to do that. Where I can change that. You can see again some of the manipulation tools where I can rotate, zoom in and out, and get this illustration to show exactly what I want to show in whatever configuration I want to show it at. If I want to add some additional details like a call out that maybe references the item number, I can do that very easily. And just like in Solid Edge Draft, if you want to create balloons or call outs that reference other information, maybe it's a part name or a vendor or any file property that you have within the design data, you can call those out here as well. But just for purposes of time, we're just going to have it call out the item number within a parts list and just get some of that detail. Again, you can see, again, if I reference the item in the list, it highlights graphically, and vice versa. If I highlight something graphically, it'll highlight within the parts list. So I wanted to show again, just real quick, how do we go from Solid Edge design into the technical publication software? Again, we can bring over some of that information, reference those display configurations. Again, we'll show later on in some of the other demonstrations utilizing some of the other information like document numbers and some other design information that comes across seamlessly. So wanted to highlight first in the first demonstration just how we go from CAD into the technical publication software. So the next area we're going to focus on is creating new documentation on the fly within the Solid Edge technical publication software. So we just saw how we bring over information, but now we're at a point where maybe the illustrator or whoever's creating the documentation, they're not CAD savvy, they don't really know Solid Edge very well, or maybe they're in a time crunch where they have to get something created quickly and they can't wait for the designer or the engineer to create it within the Solid Edge application to pull from. They just want to create something on the fly quickly. And so what we're going to talk about here is how we can create custom information like exploded views or maybe some process steps for assembly or disassembly as an example to add that information by referencing the 3D CAD data, but not necessarily anything like display configurations, for example. So we'll also go through some other detail where we can add text information and maybe some detail for clarity for these different process steps. So as we go into the Solid Edge technical publication software, you'll see obviously just like in a CAD tool, we can manipulate the model. We can look at common views with maybe an isometric view. We can manipulate the model by zooming, rotating, panning to get the model in the orientation that we want it to be in. What we're going to do now, as we mentioned, we're going to create some unique information right here within the tool. We're going to create our own unique exploded view. We'll call it disassembly, for lack of a better term, because what we're going to do is we're going to disassemble some of the components to get access to the motor. Maybe we're going to repair it or replace it, and we want to document the different steps. We're going to do that, as I mentioned, by creating the exploded view, and we do that just by picking on parts and moving them in different orientations. If I go to the exploded view area, you'll see I don't have anything yet, but as I start to move parts, it'll start to capture those different steps. In this case, step 1, which would be removing the back cover. So as I move that out, that's step number 1. As I move additional parts, it's going to create additional steps. And you can manipulate and place the model where you want on the page for different levels of clarity. So maybe, for example, I want to pick the fan, maybe moving the fan out's the next step. And so as I pick it and move it, it creates step number 2. And then for all the other components that I select and move out, that'll create all the additional steps. So we'll grab the belt drive, we'll remove some screws, maybe some washers, and then finally we'll get to the motor itself, and that'll be the final step, is taking the old motor out and then maybe replacing it with a new motor. So you have access to the model tree. You can select graphically as we've been doing, or if you want to select from the model tree, you can do that. But again, here you can see that we've captured 7 individual steps for the process, and we can simulate that process very easily by creating a new storyboard from those steps. So you'll see as I come up here, I can select this storyboard wizard utilizing the exploded view that I just created. So again, there are some options here where you can specify different options like hiding parts that are not selected. And then what that does is it takes those 7 steps and creates their own unique storyboard illustration at the bottom of the screen. When I disassembled all those parts, they were kind of sitting on top of each other, but within that storyboard wizard, there's an option where I can say, hide any part that we're not focusing on. And you can see if you look down at the bottom of the screen, all the parts are focused in specifically on the one that's selected and highlighted in red. So now that I have these steps captured, what I may want to do is just add some unique information, maybe add some additional illustrations. Maybe it's going to make more sense if I start the process showing the machine in its fully assembled state. So I can come in and create a new illustration and say, let's point this illustration to a display configuration which shows all the parts and shows them assembled. So we'll go back to the default embroidery machine where it's showed fully intact. I can create that illustration and then drag it up to the front of the storyboard because that's where we're going to start. I may also, in between taking the cover off and removing some of those internal components, just like you would in a draft file when you want to create a detail view, you have the ability to create a detail view here within the Solid Edge Technical Publication software. For large assemblies or for very detailed areas of a machine, for example, maybe you need to highlight specifically what area you're focusing on before you start showing the different steps. And that's what we're doing here with the detail view, is I can window select around the motor, maybe to blow up that view a little bit so that whoever's consuming this documentation can show that in a more detailed state. And you can reposition that view. I can turn on different properties, maybe show a leader highlighting where that is within the machine so that it's really clear exactly what we're about to focus in on as we start to disassemble some of the remaining components. So again, we start from fully assembled. First step is taking off the back cover. This is the area we're about to highlight, and then as we go through, we start to show how we disassemble some of these individual components. And you'll notice the animation and how the views are automatically changing. The next thing that we might want to do to add a little bit more detail to the instructions is maybe the parts that are highlighted in red, maybe we want to pull out some information from the design. Maybe we want to access maybe the document number so that whoever is working with this documentation, they can see other information besides just the visual image. Maybe they want to pull out the document number specifically just to ensure that they're selecting the right components. So you have access to all of the Solid Edge properties from Solid Edge. I'm just accessing the document number in this case, and I can change font and text color, things like that. But what you'll notice is as we go through each of the steps, whichever part is highlighted, it's going to access its unique document number so that for each stage in the process, the consumer of this documentation knows exactly what that part number is. So you'll see here for the fan, item number 263, as we move over to the belt, it changes to item 264 and so on and so forth. Again, ensuring that we're pulling the right information. We may also want to add some other information, maybe in text form. So again, the default is to put in just step one, step two. Maybe we want to give that some specific information. So for removing the back cover, we'll call this obviously remove the back cover, and then we can add some descriptions. So in this case, we'll type in some detail. Also new in 2023, you can actually utilize a rich text editor. So for example, if I want to maybe change font size, font color, I can actually do that with this rich text editor. Again, this is new in 2023. I'm just going to highlight some of the information in red. Again, it stands out just like the part and the part number. And you'll see that all the information that we've keyed in the bottom right-hand corner, that will automatically populate onto the page on the left-hand side. So again, you can add as much detail in text form as you want. So not only do you have graphical displays and animations, but you also have accompanying text information. And so what you may also want to do is if you look here on screen, there are some on-screen buttons. These are going to be handy for the published documentation. So whoever has this document on a tablet or on their phone, they can click on those same buttons on screen and walk through the different steps. And you do have control over the animations. As an example, I can go through transition options. How does this transition? There are some new tools in Solid Edge 2023 where maybe I want to have the parts blink before it does the animation, or maybe I want to have parts fade in or fade out. So those are some new options, and then you can control some of those details in this transition tool here. So for example, I may want to have the back cover flash before it does the animation, just so it grabs the attention of whoever is working with this particular machine. They can really see exactly what part they're about to focus on. And you have all the details for the timings of these events. So in this case, I'm going to change the duration maybe to a longer 5-second duration. And you'll notice that as I transition from the start to removing the cover, it flashes first, then it changes the view, and then it does the animation. And again, you have full control to customize that. Maybe I want the flash to last a little bit longer, then change the view, and then we'll go ahead and animate the cover coming off. Again, very easy to manipulate this and customize it. So again, you'll see now that when we do the transition, it'll flash just a little bit longer and then go through the other steps for us. And you can do that for each of those steps. So again, I wanted to highlight in this demonstration, there was a lot to unpack here. We talked about creating the customized exploded view on the fly. We talked about adding details like document numbers just for more clarity, and then also creating text information that populates within the template page itself, and then going through and showing how you can customize the animation and the interaction that the consumer has with the CAD data on screen, and how you can add all of that information very, very seamlessly. The next area we're going to talk about is how we can maintain associativity between the Solid Edge technical documentation within technical publications and the Solid Edge design. As we talked about earlier, traditionally, you had to ensure that the final design was complete before you could start creating the documentation so that they accurately reflected one another. In Solid Edge Technical Publications, not only can we reference the design CAD data and all the information, but the associativity is there so that whenever the CAD design does change, the technical documentation is automatically going to update. So we're going to go through a quick example here and show how we make a design change. We're going to focus here on the motor as an example. And again, we're just referencing this sheet metal part right there in the middle. And we're going to go back into Solid Edge and make a quick design change just to show how the documentation will be reflected with that same design change. So again, here in Solid Edge, we're just going to do just a real quick example, just for purposes of time, to this sheet metal part. And we're just going to add a couple of bends utilizing our jog feature within the sheet metal environment, just to create a couple of bends in this part, just to show that it's different. So again, as we would typically do in any type of design change, we're going to go ahead and create these bins and specify those not only on the top of the part here, but also down at the bottom, just so we can see a significant change. So we'll add these two bins utilizing the jog feature here, and then go through, save these changes. Again, we'll show how not only is it changed here in the design state or the assembled state, but also in the exploded design configuration that we looked at and have been referencing in our technical documentation. So we'll go over into the explode, render, animate environment. We'll go ahead and show how that change is automatically reflected in that same design display configuration. So let's go to our display configuration drop down just to see that that has also been reflected here. And then as we go back into Solid Edge Technical Publications, you literally just go up to the configurations. There's an update button. It'll show you what's going to update. And you just click the button, Update Models, and it'll go through, look at any changes that have made in the CAD design, and automatically update those. Obviously, you're used to a similar workflow with draft files in Solid Edge Draft, but here you can see that clicking the Update button here does the same thing here within Technical Publications. So again, just a quick rehash here, changes in the design, again, automatically reflected. Again, that's going to increase your productivity because it will eliminate those misinterpretations as you might traditionally have seen where the documentation quickly became out of date with any type of design change. So the last area for the demonstration that we're going to cover today is being able to publish this documentation to easy to consume formats. So Solid Edge Technical Publications, it's going to give companies like yours a distinct advantage in being able to offer very interactive, visual-rich web content with this documentation. Whoever's consuming the documentation, they're going to be able to easily manipulate and interrogate the data. The difference between reading about steps needed to carry out a procedure versus being able to watch those steps depicted in a graphical representation or animation, it's really going to make a world of difference for those in manufacturing, service professionals, or your end consumers. So when this technical documentation is accessible in different types of formats, which we'll cover here in a minute, really on any device that a user needs, whether it's a laptop, it could be a phone, it could be a tablet, being able to access this documentation very easily and get real clear instructions and procedures, it's really going to help whoever's consuming the documentation avoid mistakes. So let's take a look at how we can publish this documentation. And so what we've done here is we've gone through and we've created some additional detail to the documentation we were working on before. You can see here on the motor page, I've added just a couple of hyperlinks to the different illustrations that we created for the assembled state or the exploded state. So you can go through and click on those little boxes and change the documentation. Same thing here on the front page. I've added what we call an illustration table. So maybe, for example, instead of creating text, you just have step-by-step in a table format. And so those are, again, hyperlinks to show the specific illustration. So we've added a little bit more detail there. When I'm ready to publish the document, if you go to the Publish section, you'll see you can do typical traditional print settings, or if you want to do 3D PDFs or attach it to an email, or the one that I like the most is the HTML5 version, you can go ahead and publish what we've created out to those formats. And so I'll go ahead and bring up a published finished document, and you can see it looks exactly the way it looked within the technical publications area. So I've got the same hyperlinks here. The consumer, whether they're on their tablet or a phone or a computer, they can on screen click on these hyperlinks to get to the areas. So you can see the table of contents has a hyperlink to different areas. And as you can see here, the on-screen buttons allow us to walk through the procedures. And again, you can see all the details that we created are here as well in the published format. All of the text information, the design data like document numbers up at the top, how it flashes the part before it animates, all of the details now are consumed by the consumer, and they can go back and forth and look at it at any time. Again, showing all the different illustrations that we created. But given the consumer flexibility, at any point in time to go back or forth, and you'll also see here if I needed to rotate the view, maybe to get some clarity that wasn't specified within the documentation, I still have those manipulation tools on screen to zoom in and out, to pan, and to really get the information that I need to get as the consumer of the documentation. Same thing here if we go back to the motor page, those quick links to the assembled or the exploded views. Whoever's looking at this can get a real clear idea. And then also the hyperlinks and the graphical representation of the parts list and how it highlights in both areas so that the consumer knows specifically what document they're consuming. So as we wrap up the presentation for today, I wanted to end with providing you with some information about some resources that are available from a training perspective. In Solid Edge 2023, if you were to go to the program files area for Solid Edge, you'll notice that there is a particular folder for Solid Edge technical publications, and then there is a training folder there which includes 6 modules or tutorials to help you play with the software, get some hands-on experience. Here in the future, we're going to have some complimentary videos that go along with the PDFs. That's if you do have the software today. If you don't have the software today and you'd like to get a hands-on trial, there is an area that you can go to today to download the software and get access to some other information that will allow you to trial the software. And so I'll go over to that web page here real quick, and you can see within the web page itself, you can go through and go to the link for the trial, and then you'll see there's some additional information here that you can consume along with a video that you can play to get some highlights similar to what we talked about today. Also, there is within the Siemens Accelerator Academy, there's also some on-demand training, which includes, I believe, up to 19 videos. This is free for customers. If you register and create an account on the Siemens Accelerator Academy, you get access to this particular information. And I'll go to that area as well, just so you can see what this looks like. But within the Siemens Accelerator Academy, you can do some searches for different content, but here within the Solid Edge area, you'll notice that there are a number of different learning paths for different areas for Solid Edge. But as we scroll down here, you'll see that there's an area here for Solid Edge technical publications. If I go to that specific page, you'll see here again, there are different topics that you can go through. Again, there are videos that you can watch. You can see many different topics within some of these different areas. And again, just go through, watch the video, and then replicate what you're doing on screen within the software with what the videos are showing. With that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the presentation for today. I appreciate your time and attention. And I believe we're going to have the opportunity to ask some Q&A within the office hours area for this particular section. So again, thank you for your time and attention for today. Hope you enjoyed the presentation.